Alright, so this video is going to be about Gen V, which is the newest installment in the Boys universe. First of all, I would like to preface this with the fact that Rotten Tomatoes has given Gen V a 95% rating, which is insane. IMDb 8 out of 10, and IGN 7 out of 10. So that's that's pretty stellar reviews, right? All right, so let's just get into some of the reasons I have some issues with this show. Okay. So clearly the producers of the show seem to think the reason The Boys was popular in the first place was because of the over the top gore, adult themes, and just straight up shock value. When in reality, most people, that wasn't really even a factor of their enjoyment for the show. Sure, it's fun seeing people getting blown up, whatever, sure. But most people would watch the show without that fact. Um, what the boys did so well in season one and two was character development. In season one of the boys, not only were there no truly like bad characters, there weren't any characters that weren't like actually perfect. Like, I will maintain that Homelander is one of the most intimidating villains I have ever seen in any piece of media, which is like obviously extremely impressive in its own right. Like, you really don't need to get much better than that. Speaking of character development, whenever there was a grotesque moment in the earlier seasons of The Boys, it always served like a purpose. For instance, when Huey, unalive translucent, while it was like a very over the top and gory scene, there was a reason for it to happen. It was to show that, Huey had entered the battle between the Supes and the Normos to, and there was a reason for it to exist. Compare this to the opening of season 3 of The Boys, which, if you've watched, you know exactly what I'm talking about, and there's just absolutely no reason for the scene to exist, and it furthers the nope. It furthers the plot in no way whatsoever. It's there purely to shock the audience and just get reactions out of people. Like, all of this gets 10 times worse in Gen V. There are countless times where there's over the top gore, disgusting crap for no reason. And with the boys, this was excusable, but with Gen V, we don't have a Homelander that carries the show, so it just comes off as gore Zorn for like Marvel fans. Um, I think Tech Knight, the Sherlock Holmes like superhero, um, is a very good example of this. Um, he has some sort of tumor that causes him to be especially horny. And for a while, they get something going. Like, he's an intimidating force in the show. Then something gross about him gets outed, and then a main character blackmails him into doing what they want, and then Tech Knight, the entire plot line suddenly has no reason to exist, right? Like, it just, there's so many moments like that where it will just, it's just pure shock value, and I'm kind of over it. And I think the main characters of this show explain the main issues with their superpowers better than I could, like, with words. Um, both characters are required to like harm themselves in order to use their powers, which I'm sure is supposed to be some poetic statement on their place in society. They have to, sacrifice themselves in order to help people, but the meaning is completely lost when you know there you'll if you watch the show, you know what I'm talking about. Again, like, when one of these characters, she shrinks down and has intercourse with a guy, it's just like, how am I supposed to take this seriously? Like, you can't have it both ways, right? um it just doesn't work. Another big thing I have with the show is the predictability. Like, since the show is all about like the worst possible things happening to people, it's really hard to care about any of the stakes, right? Like, whenever there's any sense of peace in the show or anything good happens, it's so obvious that something awful is just going to happen and ruin every sense of, you know, good that happens in the show, right? Which I guess could be said about a lot of thriller series, sure, but it's just like it happens so much in the show that it just gets old, right? When Marie goes out to party with Golden Boy and his friends, when Marie gets told to go to the dean, the first dean, to you know, they were like, "Oh, you're totally gonna get it into that new class." Like, when Emma spills the secret that she has to that person she met in her drama class, like it's so obvious that the rug is just gonna get swept from under them, and something awful is gonna happen, just like it has every other time in The Boys and previous episodes of Gen V. I think the most upsetting part about this show is the crazy potential it could have had. Like, the woods is a really interesting concept. I think it's pretty like spooky and like it's daunting. I like it, right? The dynamic between Jordan and their parents, like it's pretty upsetting and it could be totally expanded upon. Um, the whole thing with Tech Knight where he just like knows everything, like that could be a pretty scary character, like a pretty good force of nature in the show. But it's all just ruined by the subpar storytelling and character building, um, which is I don't think The Boys has always represented that. I think in season one and season two, like that was not the case, right? Um, and speaking of season one and season two, is like there's some weird continuity errors, right? Like they just throw out pre-established rules of The Boys, right? Like the reason Homelander was so scary is because we as an audience knew that at any point he could snap and just decide to unalive every single person on the planet, right? And therefore, like any scene where like he just exerted this massive amount of power over everyone, right? And that's not only with Homelander, like every suit, like A Train, like when he was around, it was like, oh crap, this guy's scary, right? Like Maeve, like all these people, like it's they're truly like spooky characters, right? But in Gen V, there's like tons of instances of soups getting overpowered by like three dudes in SWAT gear, right? Because they have like a dog whistle, and all of a sudden that's a thing now, where soups die to loud noises, not die but get just like incapacitated, which was never established previously, and completely trivializes everything that was established in the previous series. Like, why couldn't that just be used on Homelander? Like, that kind of ruins anything that added any sense of power to these soups, right? Like, whatever. But the reason all of this is so scary to me is because there's another show that's very similar. It's getting its second season very soon, Invincible, that could very easily fall into the exact same like trap that Gen V and the boys fell into. And if that's the case, I will be very very disappointed. Um, they're both known for being pretty over the top and gory and having adult themes in the superhero realm. They're both made by Amazon Prime, right? And I could see from a producer standpoint saying, "Oh, like the only reason the show blew up is because like people like when Omni-Man killed everybody in all of these, superheroes, like that got people talking, right? So they're just going to try to up the ante like every single time." But it's not gonna work, and it's gonna fizzle out. Anyway, I just wanted to rant about this because I think this is the first case of flanderization I've seen for not just an individual character, but a series as a whole. Like everything about the boys, they just up to 100 in Gen V and the later seasons of the boys even. And well, I mean, obviously the all of Gen V isn't out yet, but I have a feeling it's just going to get worse.